Given the fact that Chinese banks are themselves beginning to acquire banks or at least make investments in banks overseas, and also being exposed to credit risk overseas because they are lending very actively in other markets, what is your role as head of international in terms of bringing it back home, meaning making sure they're able to regulate or manage or at least monitor them internationally as international institutions?
Oh, I see. For the overseas business of the Chinese commercial banks, I think the first thing we need to get such strategies or business plans for those banks if you really want to do something more in the overseas market. Yeah. And secondly, we have a very close cooperation and the relationship between home country and the host authorities. Yeah. So we exchange views on those issues. Every year we're trying to send a mission over there to have such on-site examinations, either in terms of either on the branches or maybe on the subsidiaries. But in the most part, I think for the Chinese banks, especially in some European countries, they can only set up such subsidiaries instead of branches. But in the United States, I think the Chinese banks have such a right to set up such branches. Yeah. But to my understanding, I think for most Chinese banks, they only have such a corporate business overseas. Only for the subsidiaries, they are allowed to do some local business, with the local clients. Yeah. So I think
Is that restricted by CBRC, or is that the practices of the banks themselves?
For the banks, they need to draft such the strategy or the business plan over there. And secondly, I think we also need to get approval from the host authorities.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's that. Yeah.
For example, in the UK, Chinese banks are only allowed to set up branches. Set up subsidiaries, subsidiaries instead of branches. But in the United States, Chinese banks are allowed to set up branches. If you really want to set up subsidiaries over there, so you need to meet additional requirements over there. Yeah. So for different countries, we have different requirements over there.
How much of those requirements are bilateral in terms of access to Chinese markets and access to the markets that Chinese banks want to get into?
But I think for each country, we could have such a different treatment to the foreign banks. Yeah. But for China, we are open to all foreign banks. Yeah. So they can set up a restaurant, they can set up a branch, or they can take some participation in some Chinese banks. Also, they can do some business through M&A, with the Chinese banks. So all kinds of mechanisms could be working in China, but in other countries, I think we see some differences over there. Yeah, different approaches to deal with the foreign banks over there. Yeah, but I think maybe in the future, especially in some European countries, they only want the non-EU countries to set up subsidiaries instead of branches.
How does the CBRC manage to balance between allowing the banks to continue growing and yet don't allow them to become part of the problem of an overheated economy?
I think the CBRC has done a lot in this regard. And to my understanding, the CBRC has two major functions. The first, to monitor risks of the area within the banks. And secondly, I think we're trying to encourage the banks to have a further development in their business with their clients, either in the domestic market or overseas market. Yeah. But on the first one, on the banking supervision, we ask the banks open their eyes wider, to see any potential risks over there. Yeah. And if they find something abnormal, they have to correct immediately. Yeah. So I think the banks have changed a lot in terms of mindsets, in terms of business plans, in terms of the strategies. But more important one is they have done a lot with the corporate governance. Yeah. So right now in China, those large banks, including some joint stock commercial banks, they have such a very clear picture about the corporate governance. And secondly, we also encourage banks to do some more business in China and overseas. Yeah. And we encourage banks to set up village banks, loan companies, and the cooperatives in the rural areas and also in the remote areas. So that is one to say because there's a long-term challenge we have to face is that we need to have full coverage of the financial services to be granted to everyone in the remote areas.
Right.
So that is a big challenge we have to face.
Foreign banks that want to be incorporated in China and be listed in China.
Yeah.
What is the sentiment in China? Obviously, China is very progressive and wants to allow banks like HSBC to be listed in Shanghai. But what is the sense, what are the issues involved as far as the regulator is concerned?
And we have in such a position, we have such a policy opening up to the foreign participation in the Chinese banking sector. Yeah. And we allow them to set up a rep, branch, a subsidiary, and even they can do M&A in the Chinese market. Yeah. But of course, on the other side, we are very cautious about their activities in the Chinese market. We don't want to see any negative contagion, either from their headquarters or head offices, or from the branches or the subsidiaries operating in China, to the whole banking sector. Yeah.
Well, you had something of that kind of a situation when Citibank, and some of the U.S. banks went under the TARP program. What was the thinking of CBRC when that was happening?
Yeah, especially in the past, for the last year, we sent a lot of missions to have such on-site examinations on the branches of foreign banks, on those foreign subsidiaries operating in China, and we try to find something. Yeah. But in general, we had a very good picture about the foreign participation, foreign operations.
You weren't afraid at all at any point that there might be a systemic influence where the parent bank is affected and therefore...
We have such worries, So that's why we conduct a very cooperative relationship with the home authorities, And we have done a lot in terms of MOU with more than 30 countries or the regions. So in the case you just mentioned, we have done a lot with the Fed, with the OCC, with the FDIC and the OTS. So we have such a bilateral consultation meeting every year, to have further discussions on those issues. But of course, we have some problems with those American banks. So that bank has a subsidiary in China. So we gave such a warning over there. We exchange views on the performance of the subsidiaries right here. And we also try to get information about the headquarters of that bank, operating in the United States. So in general, I think we have very good working relationship with the foreign counterparts in this regard.
Mr. Han Mingzhi, thank you so much for spending time with us. Cheers.